You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding, combating stigma since 2021. I wanted there to be a podcast about hoarding disorder from somebody who hoarded rather than a professional. That didn't exist, so I created it. And that's this podcast that you're listening to now. Subscribe to the podcast and find my social media links, episode transcripts, and every link that I mention at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. Finally, I am not a doctor. I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. Hey, how are you? Enjoy this replay of a previous episode this week, and I will be back with you with new stuff soon. So I am here with Tracy McCubbin. Tracy is the founder of Declutterfly. She has written 2 books, Making Space Clutter-Free and Make Space for Happiness. She is also the co-executive director of the non-profit organisation One Kid, One World. That's a lot of achievements in one adulthood. Tracy, how are you?
I'm good, love. How are you?
I am good, thank you. I am good. So Tracy, I should say, is a professional organiser. And so the reason I got in touch was not just that, but because you're also the daughter of a hoarder, and that is obviously relevant to the podcast. And something you describe in your book is feeling like his stuff felt more important to him than you did. And that's something I've heard from other children of hoarders as well. So how does that affect you when you're growing up?
You know, it's so interesting. It took me a long time. So I'm 57. It took us a long time to realize that my father had hoarding disorder. As we were growing up, he was a pack rat. He was eccentric. I come from Depression era grandparents. So, keeping yogurt cups and margarine tubs and rubber bands was the norm. And I also had a great uncle who was a hoarder. Looking back now, we were never allowed in his house. And, my grandmother always sort of blamed it on, the war and depression and him losing his wife. So it really wasn't until probably the 90s that we actually realized what was going on. So I think as growing up, not having an understanding, there was a lot of frustration and confusion. And, there was something I realized, and this is we're just going to get into it. I just realized recently there was something about keeping secrets. He moved around a lot, which I think he did to stay ahead of the hoarding, but he had storage units and he had the car, and it was very like, don't tell your grandmother, don't tell your mom, and I think we were trained, or I should speak for myself. My sibling can speak for themselves. I was trained to sort of keep secrets. So, it was very much rationalized. And then as emotional blows came to my father, this is my observation, as emotional blows, girlfriends breaking up with him, losing jobs, it would get worse.
Yeah.
So, it took later in life for me to correlate what was really going on.
That's really something I've heard from other people as well. You don't grow up thinking, I live with a hoarder parent. It's just your house and your parents.
Yes. And for clarity's sake, this is important. My parents split up when I was 9. So I didn't live with him full time. So I think part of what we would drop in and drop out, and I think a part of him being very nomadic was trying to stay ahead of it. And then he went and lived in a big major metropolitan city, took a job. And that's when he was sort of settled and working. That's when we saw it. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, right. But, it was a lot of sort of, stopping by the side of the road to pick tools off the side of the road and going to flea market. And, you just, as a kid, you just sort of normalize it.
Yeah. Yeah. My mum's into this, my dad's into that. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah.
He fixes cars. That's what he does. Meanwhile, I've never seen him fix a car, but he had all the tools for it. So it wasn't until sort of almost 30s that I realized, oh, this is something. And I actually had a conversation, and this is an old school name if anyone knows this, but there was a gentleman named Ron. Can't remember his last name, but his company, he was called the Disaster Master. And I read an article about him this must have been in the 90s in the New Yorker. And I was like, wait, what? Like, he put it together, and he kind of went through the history of the Collier brothers and was really sort of the first person to say, like, this isn't just someone being messy. They're not choosing this. So I called him because my dad's apartment was in terrible shape and we were trying to get him out of that apartment. And I had a meeting with him, and it was like a light got turned on, all of a sudden, like, oh, this isn't on purpose. Oh, he's not choosing this. Like, and I think that's one of the things that just makes me gnash my teeth to powder is when people are sort of, I'm so hoardery today, or I'm feeling, I'm such a hoarder. And, and that's one of my big things. It's like, this is a disorder. This is something people don't choose to be this way. There is help, there's things that they can do. But I think this idea that they're choosing, or they're just a bad housekeeper, or they're lazy, is really detrimental to the people who are trying to work through it.
It is because, yeah, people don't live like this for fun. It's not
Yeah.
how people plan their lives out. And I did an episode on whether hoarders were lazy and just listed many reasons that wasn't the case. And one of those was if you're lazy and somebody said, let me come into your house and clear it all out, you would say, yes, please.
Oh,
Whereas,
you'd be thrilled, right? If you
yes,
were lazy, you'd be like, I'll make you a cup of tea. Come on in.
exactly. Whereas if you're a hoarder, it would be the worst suggestion
Yes.
anybody could make. But as you say, those myths prevail, and a lot of the kind of media coverage doesn't help. It's improving
No.
in some ways, but a lot of it I don't like. It forgets or deliberately overlooks one or the other that this is a illness situation. It's not a choice situation or a laziness situation. And that's not to say we can't do anything about it.
Well, it really is. I mean, it's just this idea of like, well, if you just got the gumption, you'd get it done. It's like, and I do agree with you. So your listeners know I've owned a professional decluttering company for 16 years, and I don't even know, 40,000 hours decluttering people's homes. I have a staff of 12. I go all over the country, helping people. And there is a very difference. We worked with someone recently whose house was very full, very, very room she couldn't use. But in working with her, I realized, oh, she doesn't have hoarding disorder. She was overtaken by depression. She was, and she was completely overtaken by depression, because when we came in and gave her the help, she get rid of it. A whole bunch of things were ruined because rain had come in. It wasn't. And so I think that, I talk about this all the time. There's clutter, there's sort of your home getting over a certain point due to illness, due to, a thing I see a lot is people starting to have neurological issues, people's health not what it once was. And then there's hoarding disorder. And they are very different.
Yeah. Do you think, because you came out of your childhood super organized,
Yes, it would.
do you think
Yeah.
that was a response
Yes.
to, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, 1000%. It was a control. But here's the hilarious thing. So I started my business 16 years ago. I had been a personal assistant, was organizing all these other people, started to get calls, doing it freelance, just snowballed, blew up. I started doing it. It wasn't, and this just always cracks me up. I think I'd had my business for about 6 or 7 years. And I was working with a lovely client who's a Jungian psychiatrist. And we were sorting paper, going through paper. He has ADHD, so it was a different thing. And he was just asking me, a psychiatrist do. And I off the cuff, I was like, oh, and my dad's a hoarder. And he was like, oh, well, this is why you do what you do. And I was like, what? I was like, what do you mean? No, I'm just good at it. And he's like, this is why you're good at it. And I think the other thing that for me, I'll try not to get emotional. I can't help my dad. I have tried. I can't help him. He's 83. He's stubborn. I have very much. And so I think I've channeled a lot of that desire into helping clients.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm not surprised that feels emotional. That is really hard. And while it's great that you've channeled it, you've been able to channel it elsewhere, it's still really hard.
It's still a wound, and it's one of the most difficult things. It's one of the most difficult things, I think. And I've had conversations with other children of hoarders, and I think we walk a very fine line between feeling terrible. As you said, no one would choose to live like this. It's gotten in the way of his relationships. It's gotten in the way of, everything. And you do have this empathy, but you're so angry. You're so angry on the other side, because there is and I'm going to say this word, this is my opinion. There's a sort of innate selfishness to it, in the way that an alcoholic is obsessed with, that everything filters around the managing of the stuff, the rules around the stuff that change or that you don't know. So you sort of feel like you're putting all this energy in and you're not getting anywhere. So it's very, I've never been angrier in my life than I have at my father.
Yeah. And I understand that as well. Even as a person with the disorder, I fully believe that we also have to be accountable for it, not assigning blame, but just saying this is super difficult for the people around you, and there's no getting around that. And I think trying to deny that is naive and irresponsible, really.
Well, and I think I would imagine that in an acceptance and an understanding that you don't live in a vacuum, that this is one of the things, but this is, again, my own personal experience with working with hoarders and my father, that if you're not getting help, it's hard. You can't see that it's affecting other people.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden you see that it's affecting other people, there's sometimes more of an impetus to get help.
Yeah, I agree. So something I really like about your approach is that it's not about color coding your wardrobe or
look at my bookshelf
or labeling your jars. You've got lots of red books. I like that. I don't know if that's a theme. It's more about what clutter means to a person, and that makes it far more relevant to hoarders than approaches that are focused on folding or boxes. And I'm sure I'm not alone in having picked up books about how to organize your home or something, and it's just been so far from what I need. It doesn't even relate. Whereas your approach is a lot more, it feels like it could apply to somebody with slight clutter, or it could apply to somebody with quite severe clutter. How did you settle on that as an approach?
I think it twofold. I think one, I'm probably defined as an empath. I think I was born that way, and not to, I really think growing up with my grandmother, my Scottish grandmother, and like off the boat, adorable, my German farming grandparents, growing up around people who lived through wars, my grandmother, both of them, and the Depression, there was pretty early on, I was able to see like, oh, this is being saved out of an idea of practicality. I mean, I remember my grandmother talking about, drawing the lines up the back of her leg because they couldn't afford stockings. So she'd
Yeah.
take an eyebrow pencil and then sort of looking at my father, like his just complete inability to let anything go. And pretty early on, when I started working, a couple of my very first sort of organizing jobs, somebody had called me because he had inherited his grandparents' estate and he'd been diagnosed with HIV in the late 80s, early 90s. He thought he was going to die. He didn't deal with anything. The drugs came out, his life was saved. 15 years later, he had to unwind a terrible mess, paperwork,
Yeah.
property. So it came in, we did it. It was amazing, got everything settled. But, he spent half the sessions laying on the floor, like in tears, because he was reliving, it wasn't just a matter of like, oh, I've got to go through old bank statements. It's like, well, that was the year my grandma died. And so really early on, I was like, this isn't about the stuff. This just isn't about the stuff. And I don't know if I was imbued with that vision, if my experiences added up to me. And look, I can put things in pretty bins. I have a staff of 12. I have 2 women who work for me who can make it look like a magazine cover. It's not how I live. It's not how my house is. And if that's a house that you want, knock yourself out. It also takes so much work. Nobody understands. I have people who pay me a lot of money to make it look like that.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in, I mean, I am because I love doing that for clients. What I'm interested in is, how does your house work for you? Do you come home and do you feel comfortable? Can you share your space? Can you, one of my greatest accomplishments in my business, I worked with a woman who had, I would say, mild hoarding disorder, coupled with always, my observation always is the emotional blows ratcheted up. The loss of somebody, a breakup, it just elevates it. So we did her whole house and apartment. She did great. A couple of weeks later, she called me and she said, I want you to know that a friend called and said they were down the street and did I want to meet for coffee? And she said, and for the first time in 12 years, I could have a friend over for coffee. She said, was my house perfect and ready to be photographed? And I was like, who cares? She said, but I was comfortable to open my home. That's what I want. And by the way, I will also say this. If you don't ever want to have anybody over, you don't have to do that either.
Yeah. If you're just antisocial, and that's fine, be
Yeah.
antisocial.
Yeah. So it's really about, I think this isn't about being wrong. And this isn't about there's a right way to do it. There's not a right, it's your home. But if it's not working for you, if, there are rooms that you can't use, if you're constantly managing your stuff, and if it's keeping you from participating in the way you want to, then it's not working.
Do you want to be a de-hoarding darling? You can be now at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/darling. If you love the podcast and want a bit extra, you can finally sign up to be a de-hoarding darling. Members will get an exclusive monthly post with an additional top tip, some podcast and music recommendations, and a personal update from me about how things are going. Find out the full details at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/darling. So you have identified through your work and summarized in your first book 7 emotional clutter blocks. And these are things that people get stuck emotionally. And I guess that kind of manifests in keeping hold of stuff.
Yeah.
First of all, is it normal to relate to most of them?
Yes, all the time. All the time. All the time. And also, as your life changes, sometimes you'll go through different ones. Yeah, it was really interesting when I started, a billion years ago, when me and my little station wagon, I started to hear these same stories that people would tell me. Oh, I paid really good money for that. I know I've never used it, but I paid really good. Oh, my mom died and she gave me that. Or, someday I'm going to become the world's expert fly fisherman and I was like, these are the same stories. They had a little different
Yeah.
taste. And I was like, oh, these are pretty universal. Like these are pretty universal. So I just started keeping track. And then I started being asked to speak. And I would talk about them in not just, out in public. And I would see all these heads nodding and people coming up to me afterwards and saying, I'm a number 4. And that I was like, this is something. And, it's really amazing because I think we all have them, right? I think we all have them to varying degrees. I mean, I say this all the time, clutter block number 3, which is avoiding my stuff. That is me. Do not leave me a voicemail. I will not listen to it. I will send it to my assistant to listen to. Text, I will look at that. I don't open it. I have a stack of mail I got to open. I run a very successful business. I don't do it there. But in my personal life, because of everything, I've been known to avoid. I've been known to avoid. So I think that one of the things about writing the book about the clutter magnets was I wanted people to see that this narrative exists, and in identifying it, you can go, oh, right, I'm holding on to this thing because I paid really good. My favorite example is an exercise bike, as I'm staring at one in my living room. I have a client who joked, and it's to this day, there was a giant treadmill in the middle of their bedroom, giant. And I was like, taking up all this space, making their bedroom very unwieldy. And I said, do you use this thing? And he said, oh, every day to hang my clothes on.
The most expensive clothes hanger.
Exactly. And I was like, oh, right, we all have that. And so, for me, I think of decluttering and organizing. It's very fluid. I think that it changes as time goes on. A big part of my company's work is that we help people mostly parents, but after parents have passed away, cleaning out houses. And, how you feel about that versus when you're, say, a young parent is very different. And so I'm not sure if you saw the headlines, but I feel it's worth speaking about here. Marie Kondo, as everyone who knows who she is,
Yes,
she
I
admitted,
saw
yeah, yeah.
she's now no longer. I can't
Heidi.
remember how she put it. She has some clutter now.
Well, the headline I saw is she is quoted as saying, I've given up on being tidy. I'd rather spend time with my children.
Yeah.
And which I'm like, great, that's what you should be doing. But I just think I thought it was so interesting. She was so dogmatic and it had to be one way. And you asked one question and I'm like, yeah, be careful about that corner you're painting yourself into. You'll get a giggle out of this. I had a client once who said, is guilt tinge sentimentality the same thing as sparking joy?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So can you run us through the emotional clutter blocks? Just a quick summary of what they are and that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So again, they're these universal stories that we've all made up to justify why we can't let go of things that we don't need, let go of things we don't need, use, or want anymore. So clutter block number 1 is my stuff keeps me stuck in the past. This is relics of your childhood. This is clothes you don't fit into anymore. This is, you get divorced and you kind of keep everything about your marriage around. This makes you look backwards and not forwards. It tells you your life used to be better. And I'm not saying, again, I have to say this because people are like, you're telling me to throw away my memories. No, I'm telling you that if your closet is full of clothes that don't fit you because hello, gravity happens, it's called aging, you're being stuck. So clutter block number 2 is my stuff tells me who I am. And this one's really interesting because this goes everything from people who, these are shoppers, people who buy designer labels, and I have a Gucci bag and I have a Louis Vuitton, to bargain hunters. They're the other side. Like there are many, I got this on sale. I'm such a good bargain hunter. But that this means that it's all about the consuming.
Yeah, I'm very much on the bargain hunter end of that. And something you said in one of your books that really stood out to me. I can't remember exactly how you were. Oh, here we are. A sign of that clutter block was brand flaunting or bargain flaunting. And I thought, do you know what? I don't brand flaunt because I'm not really interested in brands. But I am always the person, if someone says, oh, I like your shoes, I will go, they cost £3 in a charity shop. I can't not flaunt bargains. It's yeah.
And let's unpack that because I think that's very interesting. So grew up in England, right? I'm
Yeah.
gonna make some assumptions. So there is a nationwide, what happened during World War II, the being thrifty,
Yeah.
the puritanical, like Church of England, like there's so many. And that's one of the things that I think is that a lot of organizers miss is you also have to take the historical into it.
Yeah.
Are your parents immigrants? That's going to have a way different effect. One of the things that I see a lot is I work with a lot of people who are Jewish, and it's like if someone in their family, you at this point a little bit further, but not when I started generation ago, part of the Holocaust, pictures are the most important thing because you lost all of them. So sometimes you can trace this back historically and say like, oh, right, I was raised to be thrifty. It was a virtue, which I do believe that it is. And shopping at the thrift store is good for the planet. But is my virtue all of a sudden becoming a vice?
Yes. And it's interesting. I listened to an interview on a podcast with a lawyer, nothing to do with anything related to this. It was about his career. Very interesting guy. And his parents came to the UK from Pakistan. And he was saying that he grew up here, he was born here, and they always had like suitcases ready to go, even though they haven't been anywhere for 40 years. They always had suitcases because they might have to leave. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting how, even in a context of nothing to do with clutter or stuff or anything like that, it made sense to me. Whereas my parents were born just after the Second World War, so grew up certainly in their younger years with rationing. Food was rationed. My grandparents got married in the war. They were that kind of in their 20s, and so had to make do amend to a ridiculous degree.
Mm-hmm.
There are hangovers, aren't there, from all of that history?
Absolutely. I don't know if you're familiar. There's a stand-up comic here in the United States who's her name's Ali Wong, and she's half Vietnamese. And she has this joke. It was her mother, and her mother escaped with her family out of communist Vietnam. And she has a joke that her mother is a hoarder, which I think probably more she's an immigrant, which is a different mentality. But she says, I asked my mom, like, why do you need all these yogurt containers? And her mom was like, and I'm not going to attempt the accent, but her mom says, you never know when you have to dig your way out of out of Vietnam. And she was like, she's not wrong, that I think that that's such a good point that, we were taught these traits or we inherited them and they served a purpose. They really did. I can't, in my household, it's a funny thing, but so butter comes in a little piece of paper and my partner will just throw it away. And I'm like, no, we put it in a baggie because when we make a cake, there's butter all over that piece of paper. Do you know how much butter that is? And he just looks at me and I'm like, my grandmother lived in the Depression. Like it's a bit, it's a bit, but then I think when you're dealing with hoarding, or you're all of a sudden it's like there's 30 of them
Yeah.
and you're never using them.
Yes.
Right? Like that's the thing. Oh, I never, that's when you start to go that. So clutter block number 3, as I said, was avoiding my stuff. This is paperwork, people. And the thing about this clutter block that I always find interesting is the people who suffer from this one, shouldn't say suffer, have it, tend to be very smart, tend to be very successful in other ways. And it's like, ugh, I just can't deal. I just can't deal. And it catches up with you. You got to pay your taxes. You got to pay your electric bill. Clutter block number 4 is my fantasy stuff for my fantasy life.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, this is the thing where you are going to, become someone different than you are. I got, my little niece is 8, and she called me up to announce that she is now a knitter. She's knitting. That's what she wants. She needs me to get all the yarn and she wants all the things for knitting. And my sister-in-law called me and she goes, just get her like 2 skeins of yarn. And what she's like, I just think, and I was like, a little bit of a fantasy on her part. She's like, a little bit. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
So sort of buying or keeping that, it's never going to happen. And this one's important because I also want people to really understand that, guess what? You're still a really good person if it doesn't happen. You're still great. Like, we all don't have to do everything. We all don't have to open an Etsy shop. Clutter block number 5. This one I have been all about. I'm not worth my good stuff. So this is a house full of, like, I don't use the china because it's not a special occasion. I don't burn the candle. I don't put the blouse on. I've worked with so many people whose parents have passed away, and we'll open cupboards and closets where there are things that have never been used. Never. From their weddings 30 years ago. And I just think, if today's not special, when is? And, and again, when we talk about historical, this is carried over from when there was a much more of a class system, and upper class had staff, and then the middle class came along and they aspired, and you set a table this way. And so a lot of the stuff that people don't use are relics of that. And I'm like, use it. So
There's a bit in the book that made me laugh about scented candles, having a cupboard full of scented candles. And then you said something like, what occasion are you waiting for that requires scented candles? And it's true.
Well, it's so true. And that's a really interesting, I did research for the second book, and I learned about this phenomenon called the specialness spiral.
Yes.
Where, isn't that fascinating? So for the listeners, basically what happens is you purchase an item that is not a common something, a blouse or a candle, and you bring it home, and you want to light that, you have the urge to light the candle, and you stop yourself and you go, oof, this isn't a special day. I can't burn this candle. You immediately imbue that candle with more weight. And then every time you go to burn it, you're like, oh, but that's the special candle. That's the special candle. And then 10 years goes by and all you have is an unscented jar of wax. This is great. I posted about the specialist spiral on social media, and this woman did a video about it. She owns a candle making company, and she was like, this is what I'm talking about. But she calls it the queen candle. And so she tells a story that she had a candle in her house that she refused to burn because it was very fancy. And her husband said, what are you waiting for, the queen to come over? And so then she always started to refer to that. And I was like, exactly, like, who's coming over? So this one is, and we do it with everything. Like, we're saving it, and there's no guarantee there's tomorrow. There's just wear the blouse you love, or, just don't leave things in the wrapper.
Even with stupid stuff, I am getting over a cold, so I have tissues everywhere. I have boxes of tissues, and they, then I spilt some tea, and I wouldn't use the tissue to wipe it up because these were my cold tissues,
Mm.
and they were more expensive than the cheap tissues because they're like soft for your poor nose. And I was going, I need to wipe up the tea, but I can't find the cheap tissues. And then thought, oh, come on, you're being ridiculous. And thankfully, I was able to spot it. But even, yeah, and I have some friends who got a bottle of posh wine when they got married. Somebody bought them some really expensive wine, and they didn't open it till their 10th anniversary, and it had turned to vinegar. It was just undrinkable. And it was such a shame. And yet we all do it to some, whether it's to a daft degree with tissues or that kind of, yeah, the crockery. Oh, well, we got that as a gift. We can't use that. Or I bought my parents some champagne once, and they said they were saving it for a special occasion. And I said, just drink it tonight. Just
Yeah.
enjoy it tonight.
Yeah.
It's.
It's for this. Well, I love all of that. And champagne, oh, champagne, don't get me like drink it, drink
Yeah,
it. You in France, you go to somebody's house and that's sort of the first thing they open a bottle of champagne, you just have a little glass and off you go. Just drink that champagne. I mean, I can't tell you, but I think that I want to do a little bit of a deep dive on that tissue example, because that's a really good when all of a sudden a virtue becomes a vice. Because yes, don't use the expensive tissue to mop up a spill if you use 6 boxes of it, right? Like all of a sudden, right? Like if it's a big spill, you're not going
yeah,
to use the
yeah,
expensive tissue. You're going to go get a dishcloth. But if it's one, and then like all of a sudden it gets this grip on you, and
yeah.
you think, I am getting married soon, and I did some shopping with a friend of mine who's a stylist for outfits for the wedding, and it was great. And we bought this casual, cute, super cute casual, and we were talking about the specialness spiral. And I said, I just feel like all these clothes, all the, these few pieces that came, and I'm like, I want to keep them special. And she's like, absolutely not. Put it on, wear it out the store, wear it out the store. Like, and I was like, right, wear it out the store. Like I put my old clothes in the bag and went out. And so
Yeah.
I think use the good stuff, use it, use it, use it, use it. And then if you're like, I'm not comfortable or I'm never going to do that, then get rid of it.
Yes, because if you're not going to use it, you don't need to own it.
No, you don't need to. Clutter block number 6 is a tough one. This is the hardest. And this is probably a big focus of my business, but it's trapped with other people's stuff. This, the lighter version of it is you get a gift from somebody, you don't like the gift, but and you're racked with guilt. And that was a big controversy on social media, because I was like, I think you should be able to return gifts people give you. And everyone's like, but I'm like, if I buy you something and you don't like it and you return it and my feelings get hurt, that's about me.
Yeah.
Like I'm giving you a gift. I hope I got it right. But if I didn't, if I got you a cookbook on how to grill meat and you're having a plant-based diet, go get a different cookbook. I'm not, and so that was a lot of my time. But really, this one is more, I mean, it's definitely about that, but it's also really about when people in your life pass away.
Yeah.
And you inherit it, and you're told that this is old and it's worth money and it's a family heirloom.
It was important to the person who's died, so you feel it should be important to you.
Yes. Yes. And so you feel this weight. I was at a book event once, and this woman said, and I'd never heard it so clearly, she was wrought, and I don't know, something like 4 people in her life had died in the last 2 years, like just like unimaginable. And she had these storage units, and it was full of everybody's stuff, and she was paying all this money out. And she said, I just am so tired of being a museum for the world. And I was like, right, and And the thing to remember about this is that a lot of times we actually don't want the stuff. We don't want to lose the connection. That person was dear to us. And people have said this when we're decluttering, or especially if it's got somebody's handwriting on it, they're like, I feel like I'm losing them all over again. And, for this, if somebody's listening and they're going through this, is the stuff that you're saving serving you, or is it getting in your way?
I know even with gifts, which is definitely less emotionally wrought than when somebody's died, but even with gifts, I struggle to get rid of gifts because I feel like it makes me ungrateful, or I feel like I'm rejecting the person who gave me the gift. But as soon as I turned it around and I thought, if I gave something to a friend and they didn't love it, I wouldn't want them to feel obliged to keep it in their house forever. And so I said to my best friend, look, just out of, apropos of nothing, if I ever give you something and you don't really want it, it is absolutely fine to give it to a charity shop or give it to somebody else, or, don't feel you have to keep something. And she said the same back to me. And we both fully agreed that we wouldn't want the other person to feel they were stuck with something. And yet we can still feel guilty if we're the person who has something in their hand and you think, oh, this doesn't match my style, or I don't like this kind of coffee, or whatever it is. You can still feel like, oh, but such and such bought it me. I should definitely keep it.
But don't you think the focus is, I mean, it's so like the focus is that that person thought of you and they gave you a gift. Like it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
somebody very dear in my life who I often celebrate my birthday with for sort of geographical reasons always gets me a chocolate cherry birthday cake. I don't like it. I don't know. Somehow they think that's the cake
Yeah.
I like, or that's the cake they like. I don't know. I eat a piece. It's, what matters is that this person, they get me. We are celebrating my birthday together. If I want a piece of cake, I'll make a cake. I'll go buy a piece of cake. Like it's so, so I think in that situation with the guilt, but I will also say, I think part of the guilt comes because there are people who are very dogmatic of like, I got you this and you should like it. And I'm like, that's all about what the second book, Make Space for Happiness, is about, that they're invested in what they're buying and their personality, and so we've been made to feel guilty, you're ungrateful and
Yeah.
I did this thing for you. And it's like, ugh,
You hear of people saying, oh, my mum's visiting, so I better get out that clock she bought, because if it's not there, she will say, where's the clock? Or yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing, when somebody has died, obviously that's even more emotionally intense. When my grandparents died, I, for various reasons, couldn't go to the house with the rest of my family to help sort things out. And so somebody said to me, if there's anything you want, tell me and I will pick it out. And so I gave a lot of thought to kind of what for me would summarize my grandparents. And I picked two things, and I now have those and they're great. Whereas had I gone into the house with my family, everything would have been meaningful and everything, I would have wanted it all to come home with me. And I was lucky that I didn't have to do that. And obviously, not everybody's in that position. But I think if you can do it almost as a thought experiment, if I couldn't go to the house, but I had to say to somebody else, pick out two things for me, what would you pick as really symbolizing that person for you? And the rest of it's kind of extraneous, isn't it?
I think that's so great. I'm going to commandeer that exercise
Do.
because I think it's great. So my grandmother, my little Scottish grandmother, was my heart and soul. We were very close and spent lots of time together. And she lived to be 101, and I was
Wow.
so lucky. And I lived a couple hours south of her, so especially the last 5 years of her life, I was once a month, twice a month, very, very close to her. So at the end of her life, my father moved in. And then when she passed, he took over the house. It was a house he grew up in, which is the house that he hoards in. That's where he keeps his hoard. So my most treasured safe place is a hoarding site. And it's very difficult.
Yeah.
So I've gotten almost nothing. I got her wedding ring pretty early on. I wear it every day. She had a typewriter that she was a secretary at her church, and just this typewriter. And I just wanted it. I'm never going to use it. I use it as an art piece. I just wanted it. And for years, my father, I don't know where it is. Oh, I'm getting it fixed. Oh, nope, I might need it. Like he would. And things have escalated in the last 6 months with my father. We had to move him out, and the city came in, and sort of the worst of a hoarder's, the worst thing for a hoarder, the worst thing for a family, the worst thing for the city. It all happened. And my brother took the typewriter because it was outside in a pile. And he still can't let it go. He still can't let it go. And it's a struggle, and like you, I it's the thing I think about her. She taught me how to type on it. It's really, and, but I think that's a great exercise of like, what is if you just said to somebody, if you couldn't, and you just said, grab me X, Y, and Z, it's really only a couple things. It's really only a couple things. And I think I think you bring up a good point. We're helping a woman right now whose mother died very close to her. She can't go in the house. She just can't.
Yeah.
And she's, found out about us and called us and is able to hire us. And we are able to and if you can't go in, and if have a friend go in, or ask a sibling, or set yourself up for success, not failure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So people have heard a summary of the various clutter blocks and probably nodded along to quite a few of them. What do they do once they recognize themselves? I know that's a big question, but
no, it's actually, what, knowledge is power. All of a sudden, when, one of the things that I tell people when they're starting their decluttering journey, it's awareness. All of a sudden, like, where do I get stuck? The first thing I tell people is like, just spend a week in your house and go like, this isn't working. My closet isn't working. I'm using my bathtub to store linens. Like I can't take a bath. Like using, all of a sudden, like, this isn't working. Okay, why is my kitchen not working? My kitchen's not working because I have an air fryer and an Instapot and a crock pot, and I have 10 small appliances, and I'm one person, and I don't use any of them, right? So, but why can't I let go of them? Oh, because I pay good money for them. Oh, clutter block number 7. So, it's starting an awareness and starting a conversation and realizing, oh, this is why I'm stuck, because I've told myself a story. And the interesting thing is, really when you dive into it, there's a lot of science behind this, and I wanted to say this when you were talking earlier about being, a bargain hunter. Part of why people are bargain hunters is we get a hit of dopamine when you get a bargain, because we are disposed, right? We're hunters and gatherers. So when we were nomadic and living in tribes, and you found an apple tree in the wild, you got a huge hit of dopamine to grab that apples. Well, guess what? You get that same hit of dopamine when you go to Target as if you killed a woolly mammoth, so there's a lot of like, we're predisposed for a lot of this stuff. So, being a bargain hunter, you get a little hit of dopamine. You're like, oh, look at me. I'm a bargain hunter. And then it wears off and you're like, well, I got to find another bargain to get the next hit and the next hit. And, that's one of the things in the second book, Make Space for Happiness, that I go over here are other things you can do to get that same hit of dopamine.
That's so important because, yeah, it feels great. If say I get something in a charity shop, you can say, I've helped a charity and I've recycled and I've got a bargain. Aren't I a good person? And that's quite an addictive. Of course, everybody wants to feel like a good person. Or just in the supermarket, you get a bargain and you think, ha, I've got one over the big giant supermarket.
Yeah, take that, Ralph's.
Even though it was them who priced it that way. So I haven't.
Exactly. Well, I like to say if everything's on sale, nothing's on sale. But I think that it's important. I think especially if people are dealing with hoarding disorder in the way, I'm going to just lightly, but one of the successes, one of the great things that the 12-step programs do, especially Alcoholics Anonymous, is meetings are a place to go instead of the bar or the pub. Right. Yeah. So part of that is like, 5:00, after work, I would have gone and had a pint. I'm going to go to a meeting instead. If you're making these big changes, especially if you're dealing with hoarding disorder, you also have to fill that time, right? You can't just get rid of it and think it's not, because it's taken up so much time and energy. So what can you do? And the first book is about decluttering, and the second book is about acquiring. And the second book, I tried to give people like, how can you get the same feeling? Like how, I helped the charity shop and I did this. Can you get that same feeling if you go to the local animal shelter and scratch the kitty's belly? Like, do you get that same? And so I think people need to really understand that if you take something away, there's going to be a void. And that's when people relapse, to use a big word. But I was listening to somebody, a rock star, talk about his sobriety, and he was talking about relapsing, and he said he was like, I got really bold, and I was like, I didn't bring my tools, and I went to a place where all my triggers and all my things, and I relapsed because I didn't set myself up. And I do think I'm not alone in this. I'm going to say something bold. I do think that there is an addiction quality to hoarding disorder.
I agree. And I think if you don't look at the big picture, if you're going to the shop because you're really lonely and the woman in the shop's really friendly and you always have a nice little chat, then the problem is the loneliness more than the stuff you're buying. And if you can address, the loneliness.
And if you think about it, our stuff is a buffer, right? It keeps us. I had a friend who was a smoker back when we used to do that. And she said to me, and I've always thought of this, and I think this applies to hoarding and collecting and clutter. She said, the thing about smoking for me, she said, I'm never lonely. She's like, I'm never home on a Saturday night by myself. I'm out on my porch having a cigarette. She said, I'm never uncomfortable at a party. I just step outside to have a cigarette. And I was like, oh my goodness. I don't have to confront my social anxiety because I'm out having a cigarette and I look cool. And so I think that we have to understand that there's chemical wiring about hoarding disorder, but there's also, it's giving you something. And so can you get that from somewhere else? Yeah. We just took a client on who's just lovely. She's just lovely. And she's self-professed, been shopping like a drunken sailor, and in talking to her, she retired from her job of 35 years, which was a very social job. Pandemic hit. She stopped going to church and Bible study, which had been two parts of her life, and she stopped playing bridge.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, no wonder you think the UPS guy's your best friend. Yeah. how this is how you got here. Like, before we talk about anything, can you go back to church in person? Can you do that?
Yeah.
And she was like, I can. I was like, wear a mask if that makes you, but go back, like, get that social, we're social creatures. And I think it's a really, and again, I say this, I'm not a therapist. I've just been doing this for a long time and the child of a hoarder. But I think that there's a very interesting, it's just a very interesting line with people who have hoarding disorder, that whether it's social anxiety or they feel lonely, that they start collecting to feel safer, but then the collecting and the way that their house is and the way that they're living, it isolates them further. Like, it does almost it's like, oh, this is going to
Yeah.
make me feel better, but then it isolates them either further, and then they spiral down.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. I'm quite unusual amongst people who hoard in that I have a really good social network. I have really good friends, and I know that's not typical. There's a lot of people who hoard who are very isolated, and it's immensely difficult. And if you feel lonely, so you bring stuff home, and then you've got so much stuff, you can't envisage making a new friend because you can't invite them round. It's really a vicious cycle, isn't it?
It really is. And, you know, again, to go back to the science of this, we know that community adds to longevity. We know that community adds to your health. We know that, and I talk about it a lot in the second book about how we sort of substitute shopping for showing up for our friends, retail therapy, and let's go shopping and have a glass of wine. And I do this exercise in the book where I say, think of the person you miss, whose past you miss the most. For me, it's my grandmother. Imagine I got one day with her, like something happened and she popped in for a day. What what would I do with her? Well, I wouldn't go to the mall. I wouldn't go shopping. I would sit
Yeah,
her at my table and I would make her a cup of tea and we'd migrate to a little glass of scotch. And I'd
yeah,
ask her the recipes that I never asked her that are gone forever. She made this stuff called mom stuff. I don't know how to remake it, and
yeah.
so I think that people can't underestimate the power of community and the power, and that when you're dealing with stuff, what are you protecting yourself from that you feel is a perceived threat? What are you hiding from? What don't you want to face? And it's all real. It's all real. It's trauma, it's abuse, it's everything. And I think that when you can identify with help of a mental health professional, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't need this stuff anymore.
In your second book, you talk about the impact of lockdown on our acquiring habits, which I thought was really interesting and really relevant. Can you tell us a bit about your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we had, my business was an essential service because we help people move. That's one of the services we offer. So we started working right away. So
Right.
I worked through the whole pandemic. And I just was driving around Los Angeles and I was like, Amazon truck, Amazon truck, Amazon truck, like piles of packages and I'm like, you're not going anywhere. What are you buying? And I think that people felt so I think they felt so out of control. It's like, well, if I have a spiralizer, if I have the right Instapot, everything, there'll be world order again. And our community got taken away. We didn't see people. I remember at the height of it, I drove my car around the corner. So I wasn't driving. I could walk home. And I took a little can of wine and I FaceTimed with my best friend because I was like, I just want to meet you at a wine bar and I want to wear cute shoes and I want to bitch about my partner. And I'm like crying on
Yeah,
FaceTime, like the thing that we would do. Like, I
yeah,
didn't have community in this way. And I was very lucky. I was living with my partner and, I had someone, but I mean, I have friends who were single or not, and just like it was so hard on them, so hard. And I think many, 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 many of us turn to shopping and turn to acquiring.
Because there was a lot of focus on, certainly in this country, people bought all the toilet paper in the
Yeah.
country, hundreds of packets and tinned food and that kind of thing initially. And there was a lot of focus on that. But I feel like there's been less focus on all the rest of the shopping we all did, of which, I am as guilty as anybody.
Yeah. And I think, and again, my point of view is always like, let's not beat ourselves up. Let's understand. Like we are being marketed to 24 hours a day. You can't, in the olden days when, in the United States, you had 3 TV channels. You had 3 of them. You knew when the commercials were. You went to the bathroom, you got a glass of water. Now it's like every social media, it's just you're being marketed to all the time. We were lonely. We were terrified. We were, am I going to get sick? Am I not going to get sick? Is the person that I love going to die? Like it was nothing. And we just turned to shopping because it was so easy. It was so easy.
And boredom as well. I think boredom as well.
Bored.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And remember, you get a little hit of dopamine. Bing, you get a little hit of dopamine. And so, how can we give ourselves that same feeling without the shopping?
So, what kind of things do you suggest as dopamine alternatives?
Oh, yeah. It's just, I all giggle. It's like, it's just this stuff that my grandmother, exercise, take a walk, take a walk. And here's the thing, taking a walk, you're going to see your neighbors, you're going to have a hello with someone, exercise, community. Can you go volunteer somewhere? In the second book, I came across this Dr. Laurie Santos. This is actually great for people. There's a woman here, Dr. Laurie Santos. She has a podcast called The Happiness Project, which is fascinating. It's about the science of happiness.
Oh,
Fascinating.
I recognize her name, but I will subscribe to that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. But she also, through something called Corsica, she taught a class at Yale, which is now available free. So you can take the class. And she goes over a lot. It sort of depends on how you like to learn. For me, podcasts are better. The course, I was like, I got through it. But she just talks about, like, one of the things that she said, when you write a handwritten thank you note, you increase your dopamine for 30 days. The residual effect of a handwritten thank you note.
Wow.
And somebody was saying to me the other day, they said, oh my gosh, my mother must write 10 a week. And I was like, how old is your mother? And she's like, oh, she's 95 and she still volunteers at the hospital. And I was like, there you go. So community,
Yeah.
volunteering, being of service is, and in that way, to go back to what you said about, well, I'm shopping at a charity shop, I'm helping it's like, can you do that same thing without consuming? And then also,
Yeah.
whatever you call it, and the science is there, people, the science is there. A gratitude practice, counting your blessings, however you want to name it. But that act of waking up or before night, being grateful, it works. It works. It's science. It works. You can't feel in need. If you're grateful, you're like, well, I have a roof over my head and I was able to, I turned on my faucet and clean water came out of it. Like, if you're in that space, all of a sudden you don't need as much. You're like, I've got plenty. So it's really the sort of simple things, which is great. That's the great news. It's not this complicated. You got to go live on an ashram for 6 months and, give up Diet Coke, which I will never do.
It's good stuff.
Oh, it's my, I'm down. We have, I don't know if you have them in the UK, but we have these mini cans in the United States. And I'm like, Perfect. Just a mini can of Diet Coke.
We have a drink here that I think you don't have called Pepsi Max, which
Mm.
you have Coke Zero, don't you?
Yes. Yes.
It's kind of the Pepsi equivalent of that. So it's the sugar-free, but we have a cherry flavor Pepsi Max, and it is just magic stuff. So good.
I gave up Diet Coke for Lent a couple years ago, and I put it up on social media, and everyone was like, "Oh, I gave it up years ago, but I can still hear the bubbles. I can still." It's like this,
I'm
And I'm like,
I'm an ex-smoker, and
"Uh huh."
I think I'm 7 years now since I had a cigarette, but if I walk past somebody smoking, I'm still like, let me breathe that in.
But right, so that must have resonated you with this about smoke. What my girlfriend said about like
100%.
I'm never lonely when I'm smoking. I'm never.
Yeah, something I noticed that I hadn't expected. Because obviously, most things about giving up smoking are great. Mostly, it's nearly all positives. And then I went to a conference and I realized that at conferences, when there are 300 people in the room, you don't know who to speak to or how to approach people. And then you go out for a cigarette and you speak to the other smokers because there's a group of five of you. So that's easy. And suddenly I was at a conference not going out for a smoke. And I was a bit lost. I didn't know how to have a conversation in that vast arena compared to the limited number of people outside.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
We're looking for our tribe and we're looking for the commonalities. And so you're like, oh, we met at
Yeah.
pre-pandemic, I used to go out for exercise classes. And so we have, and there's this place in the United States called Soul Cycle, and it was a thing and everybody went. And I can, I'd see somebody in Soul Cycle gear, and you had someone to talk to. You're like, you're like, you look familiar to me. You'd be at a party, you look familiar. Oh, do you take so and so's class? And all of a sudden you had a commonality. And I think what you said earlier, and I don't think that we can, like, this is so important that, like, what is the thing underneath? Is it social anxiety? Do you feel lonely? Are you grieving? Like, there's a thing. And when you can remove all the clutter and see the thing, then you address it. And it's like, oh, you know what? I, you know, I don't, yeah, I mean, it's a million things, what I thought was a normal childhood was actually trauma, and I need to deal with that, and so that's what it's about. Let's strip it away. Let's strip the stuff away and get to our essence and work on that.
So the big question is always I get messages saying, I just don't know where to start. I don't know where to start. If you could give people a point or two to just start, where would
Mm-hmm.
you suggest they start?
So I always start with, if you think you have hoarding disorder, if it's sort of that, I'm always start with a mental health professional. Always start there. There's an amazing, I'm sure you've talked about on here, a very high success rate with something called cognitive behavior therapy to help people. I used it to get over my fear of flying. It's genius. You don't have to talk about losing your dolly when you were 6 years old. It's
It's
fantastic.
focused, isn't it?
It's focused.
Yeah, I've had it and got some skills that several years on I still use daily.
Yep. Yep. Every time I'm on a plane and I feel it coming up, I say to myself, as long as the flight attendants are still serving coffee, we're good. And that calms me down. It
Yeah.
calms me down. So that I would start with that. I would, so that's always a great place to start. Of course, I would suggest reading, especially my first book, Making Space Clutter Free. It's an audiobook. It's, there's lots of ways to consume it. Awareness. And then, I have them up on social media. And I also, if you go to my website and sign up for my newsletter, I have a PDF of 25 things you can declutter in under 5 minutes. So little categories. And I think it's a great place for people who are really struggling to start because of two reasons. One, it's bite-sized. Not your whole house. It's not, you don't have to start. I don't tell you to start with the family photos. And in starting with these bite-sized chunks, you can start to observe like, oh, this is, and I use this word lightly, like, this is a meaningless object. It has meaning to you. That's not what I'm saying, but like, this should be something that I should be able to go through my junk drawer and get rid of all these rubber bands, like, cause they're broken and I don't. So in doing these little bite-sized chunks, you're going to start to have an awareness of what comes up. Oh, wow, this is incredibly hard for me. Why is it incredibly hard for me?
That's amazing. So interesting. It's given me a lot to think about, and reading your books has as well. And so if people want to find your website, your social media, your books, where can they do that?
Absolutely. So my website is Tracy McCubbin, MCCUBBIN.com. By the way, one of the things I love doing, my family's Scottish and Irish. And so every time I do something based in the UK, I get a little DM from someone who's like, I think we might be related. I'm like, makes me so happy. There's a woman outside of Dublin. I'm like trying to get to Ireland just to see her. So if you have a McCubbin or a McGilvery in you, please reach out. So my website, you can sign up for the newsletter. I don't clutter your inbox. Social media, Instagram is a big place. I'm just at Tracy McCubbin. I do these, I put about 3 or 4 up a week. Very, 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 very supportive. Super supportive community. I shut grumpy people down in 3 seconds. I got no time for it. So that's a great place. I'm over on TikTok. It's a bit of a hellscape, but I stick around. And then the books are available everywhere. I know that they're, I don't know what your equivalent is, Amazon.
Yeah.
In the UK, we have Barnes and Noble here. Do you have Barnes and Noble there? I forget
what we don't. We have Waterstones is probably the big,
Yep. And audible.com, which I know is international, is the audiobook, which I read. So if that, but I'm around, I'm here. It's just, I loved having this conversation. And I have so much respect for you for diving deep into this, because it's not easy. And I have watched people's whole lives go past them and not. So I have so much admiration and respect for you.
Thank you so much. That really does mean a lot. It's good to hear. And thank you. You're doing great work and you've got a lot of insight.
Some days it's a blessing, some days it's a curse. It's not with everything. Well, hopefully I sort of eyeing the UK, talking about some book stuff. So maybe you and I can share a Diet Coke.
Absolutely. And I will introduce you to Cherry Pepsi Max and see what you think.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've been thinking about how many of us have to keep our hoarding secret. I will get to the top tip of the week in a sec, but just for a moment, let's talk secrets. I certainly keep my hoarding secret, and I've been wondering about the effect that these secrets and the shame have on us and our mental health. I'm thinking of doing an episode about the secrets we keep about our hoarding. And if you feel comfortable, I want to hear your hoarding secrets. I've created a form where you can submit your secrets anonymously. I will not know who sends what. If you want to tell me your secret for a potential future episode, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/secret. That's overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/secret. Now back to your top tip. So my top tip this week is from the It's All Clutter podcast. And I will link to the It's All Clutter podcast in the show notes. But this is Not new advice, but still good advice, always worth reiterating.
Do not buy boxes or bins. They're not going to work. We're not containing clutter. We have to declutter to get organized. Think about it this way. If you had less stuff, it wouldn't matter if it were organized. If you could see everything that you had all at once, organization would not matter. We have to declutter before we can organize.
So, absorb it. I will too, I promise. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to the Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. You can find more online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. You can find me on Twitter at @Hoarder and on Facebook at Overcome Compulsive Hoarding with @Hoarder. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to this podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes.